Now to house prices. What will your home be worth 12 months from now? The latest figures out this morning show that Sydney has suffered a big drop in the 3 months to the end of last year.
The markets have also weakened in both Perth and Darwin, but the property market appears to still be strong in the other capital cities. Andrew Wilson is the senior economist at Domain, and they've conducted an audit of house prices across the nation. He joins us now from Sydney. Good morning, nice to see you. So is the housing boom over in Sydney?
Well, certainly it is over. The Sydney market has come back to earth with a thud. Median house prices down by 3.1% over the December quarter, and that's the sharpest fall that we've ever recorded for house price growth in Sydney. So, yeah, the glory days are over for the Sydney boom, and really questionable will there be any growth this year in that Sydney market.
So what explains that sudden crash?
Well, look, higher interest rates that were set by APRA, firstly for investors in Sydney, which were a high proportion of the market.
Sorry, just to jump in there if I can. So it really was overseas investors driving that market?
No, I think it was local investors. We had over 60% of market share, lending market share in Sydney mid-year were investors.
Right.
That was the strongest proportion of any of the capitals. Higher interest rates from APRA certainly took the heat out of that part of the market. And then we saw rates rise for owner-occupiers in October. And really that was the end of the ball game for the Sydney market. Auction clearance rates fell from the autumn rates of near 90% down to under 60% by the end of the year. So no surprise that prices followed those auction clearance rates down in Sydney.
All right, so poor old Sydney. What about the other big capital city, Melbourne?
Well, that too went backwards in terms of the level of prices growth. Prices still grew up by 1.8%. But that was the lowest quarterly result since September 2014. But, you know, Melbourne house prices up by 14.5% over the year. Really a boom in prices over the full year. The best result since 2010 for Melbourne. But again, affordability barriers and higher rates just took the top out of that market. But it should have a reasonable year this year, given the median in Melbourne is just over $700,000 compared to Sydney, which is still over $1 million.
So Adelaide, Hobart and Brisbane, they're going quite well too.
Well, look, a modest year for the Brisbane market, up by 4%. That's actually its worst result since 2012. But the smaller capital city markets, Adelaide, Canberra and Hobart particularly, they're in catch-up mode. They haven't had the growth that the Sydney and Melbourne markets have had over the last 2 or 3 years, and they're now growing, confidence is returning, and their local economies are also improving. So they haven't had the impact of higher rates and the impact on confidence that the Sydney and Melbourne markets suffered at the end of last year.
So which are the cities that are doing badly then?
Well, look, the mining states continue to pull down their capitals. Perth house prices fell by 0.8% over the December quarter. That's 4 quarters in a row of falling house prices in Perth. And house prices in Perth are now lower than what they were 2 years ago. But maybe some early signs that market is bottoming out. That rate of growth over the December quarter was the best for the year in terms of the level, and maybe confidence gradually starting to return to that Perth housing market.
So what does this mean then for the months ahead? I mean, what are the key drivers of house prices in those major cities in the next 12 months?
Well, look, it's certainly a confidence factor in Sydney that's pulling prices down. Buyers and sellers are sitting on the sidelines. A lot of demand was brought forward during the boom period. I think the Sydney fundamentals are still strong. Strongest capital city economy, strong migration, a shortage of housing. So it's just a question of when buyers and sellers determine that they'll get active in the market again. And I think that's when the signs of the market bottoming out become evident. But look, we have no signs of that yet.
And in your estimation, would you say this is one of the worst times then for people who are trying to get into the market, who are just trying to buy a house?
Well, look, it's probably better news for first home buyers in Sydney that remain at historically low levels as a proportion of the market. They're not going to see prices escalating at double-figure annualised rates. Prices going backwards is good news for first home buyers, although it's still a mountain to climb.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure we'll see a significant rise in first home buyers in Sydney, which will still remain Australia's most expensive market.
Yep. When they look at the median house prices, it's just eye-watering. Good to talk to you. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you so much, Virginia.
Okay, now to one of the